Nathan, always good to see you and to have a chance to catch up. How are things?
Very well, thank you, Phil. Very well indeed.
Last time we spoke, you were quite upbeat about transaction volumes and that kind of thing. So I wondered if we could just kick off with that.
Fortuitously, transactions have retained their momentum, really. We are still on target to hit that normal sort of 1 to 1.2 million barrier, which, despite the changes going on at the moment, I think is fantastic news.
I mean, there have been a lot of changes since we were together. It was 6 months ago, wasn't it? We've got a new government.
We have.
We've got interest rates declining.
We have.
And inflation, that's going in the right way as well. Generally, how are you seeing the market?
I think we're seeing it very good. I mean, I think there are a number of drivers there. So we're seeing stock levels increasing, so the available stock is there. And obviously we are still seeing prices continue to creep up a little bit. So there were concerns that prices might dip, but we've not seen that. We've seen them continue, and that supply's increased. And I think we are geared up for a fairly positive first quarter next year, really. Stamp duty in April, that might be a slight blip on the horizon, really, but subject to that, it's all looking very good at the moment.
What about time to sell?
Yes, and that again has continued to be good. So we're looking on average at about 8 to 10 weeks in order for a property to sell, and that accounts for the properties that come on very keen in a great area that sell overnight, but also those that would normally take a little bit longer. So that mean average time is holding itself extremely well, which, bearing in mind there's more stock on the market at the moment, I think is actually quite encouraging.
But that's an interesting and different scenario. More stock available, but speed of sale has come down.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's a combination of things together, and we don't know how much the stamp duty changes will have accelerated that. With people that are existing transactions pushing them through, and people thinking, well, actually, if I want to sell, now's the time to sell. I'm more likely to attract a buyer while the existing stamp duty regime's in place. Those pieces we will never know. Either way, it's strong at the moment, and it's looking good into the first quarter.
You don't always say that, do you? From the numbers, and it is the numbers that tell the story rather than opinions, but I'm picking up it's quite resilient.
It is, and I think the one thing that we have to remember is the underlying trend is that the population in the UK is continuing to grow for various reasons.
Yes.
And it's all about supply and demand. And if you think about it, we added just over 200,000 new houses on last year. Government's now trying to do 1.5 million over the parliamentary term. That's 300,000 plus per year. So despite the fact we're adding new stock on, the numbers that are actually selling are staying relatively stable. So some people are staying in their houses a little bit longer. A big issue that we've got to tackle as a nation is where we've got older people sat in bigger houses, not having the momentum or the ability to sell and find what they want. We don't have enough bungalows. So.
Do you think there could be a day where there could be greater motivation for those people to move? I read there were 10 million empty bedrooms in this country.
Wow, there you go. You know more than me on that. But no, but I agree. I think government is aware of that. We've raised that for a long period of time, and so have other organisations as well, because if you haven't got anywhere for older people to go to of the right accommodation... Yes,
and you're going to tax them for doing it.
Then there's no incentive for them to do it, because that's also a stage of life where they're thinking about paying for their own care, and they're also thinking about what they may or may not leave to relatives. And I think if we don't unlock some of those properties, it will cause frustrations elsewhere.
I couldn't agree with you more. I can't think how to do it, but there must be someone cleverer than you or I that could come up with the scheme that would motivate them.
I would hope so. But I think, a lot of what the government is looking to do with regard to unlocking land and increasing the availability of building land may have a detrimental impact on land prices, which may mean that building can be more affordable. These are all very tenuous parts, but effectively we need the right kind of accommodation building, not the wrong kind of accommodation.
Got it. You mentioned affordable. Let's just catch up on affordability and where that sits. Average property prices, wages, borrowing capacity.
Yeah, so obviously people recently have had a number of good ticks really. So we've had new increases in minimum wages. We've seen lower interest rates coming through, and also inflation's now much more curbed. So affordability for people, which was an issue for people a little while ago, is much more under control. And we're starting to see that, because that still meant the house prices have continued to creep up. The average house price is still under £300,000 outside of London, I will caveat. So we've still got house prices which have whilst have grown, haven't become rampantly out of control. It's just the right balance and that little bit more affordable, because those pressures have been taken off on a daily basis.
At the end of the day, it is market forces, isn't it? And that's what dictates the world that we live in.
It very much is, and you know, yes, people have to buy together. Yes, people are buying a little bit older than they previously were. The one thing I would like to see is continued incentives to help people to get onto those ladders. We've discussed that stamp duty obviously is changing, and a number of other areas are being repealed. Right to buy, help to buy. But that doesn't mean the government haven't got time before they come up with new incentives, and I rather hope they will.
Couldn't agree more. We had a comment on our last video that somebody wrote in. The asking price indices need to reflect price reductions, not only newly listed property. What would be your advice on the best way to research local property prices and trends? The different indices can be confusing because they share different data.
I think that's a very good question. And to put the indices into context, we actually have research officers that have to pore all over these all of the time to actually get out the right piece of information. It's not that all of the indices aren't factually correct, they are, but they're all telling a different story from a different angle. And even if you factor in, reduced prices and properties back to the market, what you're not going to get is a reliable guidance for what you need to do in your own environment. It'll give you a guide, but it's not going to be accurate.
Well, it can be accurate, but you need to know
how to apply it.
Exactly, how relevant it is to you.
Absolutely, and I think that's sometimes the difficulty. As I said, we have research officers that need to do that to actually make it viable for what we need to do. But as a consumer, there are a lot of tools out there. All of the portals, the main portals, do have different tools on there, and they don't just have the tools that reflect the houses coming onto the market. Most of them do have land registry details in there, and obviously national statistics details in there. There are consumer fronting sites like your Move IQ, Phil, that are constantly updating and providing more and more guidance to consumers. But the best way, I would always say to everybody, is their own local market and the area they specifically want to live in is of absolute importance to them. And
that's because the market's polarised all over the place.
100%. The UK is made up of mini markets. That's the truth. So we talk about broad statistics. We even talk about regional statistics. But actually, what's happening in each town and city is a different demographic. And in that area, I've always encouraged people, to look at the areas they want, to print off the brochures, to drive around, to look at the properties. And if they are serious about them, not time wasting, but serious, to actually go and look at the properties of interest to them, they'll soon get a feel as to what's right and wrong. You can employ, buying agents to support you. That's not an expensive process, not when you consider the actual price you're paying for your biggest asset. And so there are support mechanisms out there to support the consumer in getting right. But property purchase is emotive. And you're going to be living somewhere for the next 10, 15 years. As we've already shown, prices in the UK have continued to rise. They're not going to not continue to rise. So you should take comfort. If you're buying within a reasonable band, you will never be out of pocket in that short to medium term.
Yes, so long as you buy a property that you can stay in for a nice long time. He does talk about reflecting price reductions. What's your take? I'm never that interested in a price reduction because it was clearly not priced correctly to start with or not marketed well. It's the price today is what I'm interested in.
Absolutely, and when you put a property to the market, when there are owners saying I want more for it than the agent's valued it at, so it's not always the agent, sometimes agents will be a little bit more bullish because of something else they've had a success. That market does undulate, we know that, and it's a best guess as to where that market sits. And that market does change.
I guess if there's a raft of prices being dropped, then that shows a trend.
Correct.
But just, yeah, the odd one doesn't tell me very much.
Individual properties can come down, as you rightly said, to how it's priced, how it's marketed, and the availability of the types of buyers at any one particular time. When you get national price reductions on a major scale,
yes, that's different.
That's a very different thing.
Yeah. So the advice is to get out and actually do your own. Use all the help that there is.
Absolutely.
Understand the indices and what point they're taking their data from and how relevant that is to you. But get out into the market, do your own research.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's not a science.
And it's not as difficult as you think once you get into it. Many people will do the same when they buy a car, Phil. They won't just go to one garage and try one car. They'll try 3 or 4 cars.
Compare, contrast.
Contrast, work out the what's included, look at the pricing, and it gives them a benchmark. There are stops and gaps in the entire process. You know, for anybody who buys a house who has an independent survey and valuation, that's giving you a professional viewpoint at that stage.
Yeah.
You can get a buying agent to help you through the process.
Yeah.
So there are various mechanisms there to help shield the consumer.
Great, thank you. Another comment that we had raised was someone wondering if people are worried about future punitive green taxes based on energy efficiency. I'm rejecting properties, they say, that are below a C because I don't trust our politicians not to become zealot-like when taxing. What's your response to this from your work with government and looking ahead? Over to you, Nathan.
I think a change of government has certainly seen a lot of, we're seeing a lot happening in the planning area. We're seeing the new government are still staying committed to delivering an EPC level C for 2030, which is in the rental sector, with potential plans to expand into the private sector. They're also looking, I was with the minister the other day, they are looking at introducing the decent home standard, not just from social housing into the private rental sector.
Right.
So you've got an awful lot of things they've got in the go at the moment, and they're trying to find people to build 1.5 million new homes. If anything like that were to happen, I would suspect it would be a lot further down the line, and there are a number of reasons for that. There are still debates as to whether the current EPC structure is correct, whether it's actually fit and viable for what we're now trying to achieve and what we now understand about the environment.
Okay.
So there is that debate going on. And also, I think, again, you're bound to, a lot of our stock in the UK is older. Not everybody wants to live in more modern properties. And some of those properties do and will need retrofitting. Some won't be able to be retrofitted.
Yes.
So I think the debate is still out on that at the moment. Your viewer was quite right. There were potential murmurings that might become a way of taxation. I think if it did, I think would be a lot further down the line. I don't think we've got everything in place to even remotely think about it, and I don't think that's on the horizon in the next in the foreseeable
It wouldn't
future.
be a popular one, would it?
I don't think it would be a popular one.
But it'd be extremely difficult to actually
It
navigate.
would be very difficult to navigate, and I think, as I said, there are a number of challenges to the current EPCs. We do know the previous government were looking at restructuring that. As to what happens with our new government, time will tell.
Last year, you told us that if you knew a sale or letting agent was a qualified member of a professional body maintaining high industry standards, you would choose them over an agent who was not. Well, agents who are members of PROPERTYMARK are not only regulated, but qualified too. There are currently over 18,000 members right across the UK, all adhering to a strict code of conduct and membership rules. And that is why we at MoveIQ endorse what they do. To find your local agent, look for PROPERTYMARK and let them know I sent you.
We get quite a lot of questions at MoveIQ about avoiding delays to sales or deals falling through, and it's a major concern for people. Chains are getting longer, deals are falling through. How can people put themselves in the best position for a really smooth sale?
Very good question. I'm going to start with the keyword communication. I think that is one of the most important aspects. If you've got a good estate agent acting for you, and obviously I'm going to say a PROPERTYMARK agent, but if you've got a good quality estate agent, they are there to act for you and to support you. And very often during a transaction, people can bury their heads when they feel that pressure and not communicate as much as they should. Again, I would say a lot of this is getting sale ready. So
Yes.
there's
In
a big
advance.
in advance. So there's a big rush to get the house on the market.
Yeah.
In the time frame of a transaction, which can be 26, 28 weeks long, whether you delay putting the house on the market by 3, 4, 5 days or 6 days to get the information together is very, very little difference, but actually will make a quantum difference in the time it takes that transaction to go through. So it's take your time to speed your time.
Is that because people get excited, the agent gets them excited, get the house on the market, yeah. And then they don't follow up and get all their paperwork?
Correct.
Because they were in the throes of it.
Absolutely. So your estate agent should have what's called a PIQ, Property Information Questionnaire. They're quite in depth, and you'll go through those and fill out all of the information about your property, any guarantees you've got, any certificates, you need to get these available up front. For a number of reasons. Firstly, the more we've got up front means that the actual conveyancing process with the solicitors is quicker, it's tidier, there are less delays, and of course delays cause people to doubt and cause issues. You've also got a situation where we have material information now, upfront material information, which for your listeners, the consumer protection regulations are about making sure that people are aware of anything that may affect their transactional decision.
Yeah.
And that can be anything from rights of way over a property, something that's happened to the property or something that's been done to the property, or even if it has broadband, for example. So collating this information now is important, and it will go on the portals as well, so that there's more information available for people to make an informed decision.
So will it be the agent that has the obligation to have that information and make it available, or is it the vendor's responsibility?
Both. So an agent will be responsible for collating certain pieces of information. A lot of that is readily available, so there are various sources out there, things like council tax, etc., which will give those core costings. But actually, a big liability does sit with the householder, and it always has done. What we're talking about here in this question is speeding up that transaction and making sure what you're giving is valid information. Normally, you'd have agreed a sale. This would have come out during the conveyancing process.
Yes.
That world is changing to the degree we're saying to somebody, well, look, before you buy my house, here's all the information so you can make that informed decision before you start buying it and ultimately pull out the property halfway through. So you need to be open and transparent. You need to declare anything on there that people need to be aware of, and also the good things about a property. So it's an in-depth form that you need to fill in. But I think if you get that done up front and ready,
Before you go to the market.
make sure your agent's got all the information they need, because they have to upload it to the portals.
And just sort of the headlines of that would be any completion certificates, any documents, any guarantees, any licenses,
Any planning permissions, anything that sits around your property is required. Now, eventually, there is a theory we're going to move to digital passports on properties with a unique property reference number, where that will be held from person to person to person, but we're not there yet. So it is more a case of getting that information together and also thinking about your position. If you get a buyer, Phil, are you reliant on waiting till you found something else? Or actually are you thinking, if I've got a buyer, I'm prepared to break the chain? You need to be very clear about what you will and will not do from day one and get that communication over. Most chains fall through because somebody somewhere has promised they'll do something that they don't do, and then a whole chain of houses can fall through. These are people's biggest moves, people's biggest assets, and the pressure of buying and selling houses can be intense. Yet if you plan and prepare, you can reduce that stress, and you can speed the timescale, and you can reduce the likelihood of that sale falling through.
Which is good news for everyone.
Good news for everyone.
Very good advice. Thank you, Nathan. Another one here. What should sellers consider when comparing offers, particularly if buyers are stretching budgets due to higher interest rates?
Good question.
I mean, obviously price is important, but there are other things at play. And agents, you should be able to have that grown-up discussion with your...
Correct. Your agent will certainly guide you. You will have to make the final decision. And agents are, for clarity on this, agents are legally obliged to put forward all offers to you. So regardless, they have to put those offers, they have to discuss those with you. Even if you've got a sale on the property and somebody comes back, a lot of people think agents push this, it's not, it's a legal requirement that we do. But it's not just about the price. It's firstly, the next question is, somebody's offered me that price, am I actually going to get it in the first place? Offering something and somebody being able to deliver. So does the buyer have cash, or if you've got multiple buyers, is anybody in a cash position? Is that cash from sale, or is it because they've got the cash physically sat in the bank? Because if it's cash from sale, they're in a chain. Do they need a mortgage? What's the loan to value? So are they borrowing 50% because they're putting 50% down, or are they borrowing 80% because they're only putting 20% down? So the more you put down, the less likely the building society is to cause issue with the purchase price, or indeed any issues or any problems with the property that may need basic repair, really.
Something I always think about is who do you want to be in business with? You're going to be in a business deal. It's a very big, significant, emotional, expensive business deal. You're going to be in that deal together for months, and stuff's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Who do you want to be dealing with?
Absolutely. You've got to, if you're in a position where you've met your buyer, and some people sell remotely, then that's brilliant. But again, sometimes you have to just take that step back and just think,
yes,
I like this person, but have they got that position?
I suppose maybe it's not the person, but it's how organised they are, how committed they are,
100%.
how upfront they are, how honest they are, how much you believe them.
If they're buyer ready, which is what we'd call it, they've already gone to the lengths, they've got their mortgage certificate up front, they've got the position to proceed, they're open and transparent, and they're dealing with things in as much of a professional way as they can do. The agents will also guide you on this as well, because, you know, at the end of the day, there are a lot of factors in place. Everybody needs to feel comfortable before you start that journey. And if you set off with bad foundations, it'll only cause problems. So take your time, take the advice of your agent, and consider all of the aspects of a buyer's position.
Not just price.
Not just the price, and not just how they're going to deliver the money.
There's some changes coming down the track. Renter reforms, planning reforms, all being talked about. Are they going to happen? Are we going to see?
Oh, they're definitely happening. So I think one thing we can say about this government is they are absolutely determined, certainly from a property point of view, to drive through the thoughts they've had. So the current Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, has sat in position as a shadow for 2 or 3 years. So he's very clear about what he wants to deliver. So you're quite right, the previous government started with the Renters Reform Bill. That was repealed, became the Renters' Rights Bill. Renters' rights. This is not about landlords, this is about renters' rights, and building a framework to give tenants the clarity that they want around property, the length of time that they want in a property, and ensuring that people aren't out on the street within, you know, a 2-month period, something like that. So there are big changes happening in the rental sector. There's a lot of pushback at the moment from landlords. There are concerns that landlords may leave the sector. There are concerns about how the court systems will operate. So at the moment, if I want you to move out of my house and you've been through your statutory period, your 6 months we may have agreed, I can give you a notice, 2 months notice, as Section 21, to say, look, Phil, thank you very much, but I need my house back now. I won't be able to do that. So what I will now have to do is what's called a Section 8. And that means I have to go through a court process to ask you to leave the property and evict you from it. And under Section 21, I could ask you to leave because we've got to the end of the agreement and I now want the house back. That won't be the same going forward. So when you move in as a tenant, you effectively can stay there until you decide that you want to go, or I give you notice through the court route, and there will only be prescribed reasons why I can ask you to
Would
leave.
moving back into it be a prescribed reason that you wanted to move in?
It could be a prescribed reason, could be moving back into it, or selling the property. It could be because, and I'm sure it wouldn't happen, that you didn't pay the rent for a period of time. And so there are various mechanisms which will be there to encourage the property to come back, but there are greater protections for the tenant, is what I'm saying. So what that means is anybody putting a tenant into a property will probably do a lot more research and homework to make sure they've got a tenant that they're comfortable with.
And how is the industry taking these changes?
I think the industry is aware that the government is determined that they are on a track And once they have engaged in conversation, they're quite determined on the path that they are on. And anything to do with landlords, they will probably deal with separately.
Okay.
They understand that it will cause turmoil in the sector, and it's a sector where we already have a massive shortage. So we actually need more properties for landlords, not less. But their viewpoint is if a house and a landlord sells it, it'll either go to a first-time buyer or another landlord will come in and get it.
Okay.
They're not worried.
Okay.
And they're going to go down that track effectively. But this is about giving security for people to have a roof over their head for a longer period of time, so long as they pay the rent and they look after the property.
Do you think we'll get to the point where we have a much longer tenancy? You know, a 5-year tenancy? Or...
Well, we're already seeing tenancies increase. So whilst people normally will go on in property for a 6-month or a 12-month period, actually the average tenancies, you know, are between 3 and 4 years, but on average anyway.
What, they stay for 3 or 4 years?
Yes, absolutely.
But they've only got a 1-year
Correct,
tenancy.
but that will change now. So the new, effectively, once you move in, you'll effectively be there as long as you so wish.
Okay, good. And what about planning laws? Lots of talk about planning laws.
Absolutely. So, and again, very, very controversial. So I don't think anybody would argue that we need to build more houses. And I don't think anybody would argue we need some degree of planning reform. However, how far they go with that will be quite telling. So there are a number of things to bear in mind. So the first thing is we're going to go and build 1.5 million houses. The reality is to gear that up, to deliver that in this first parliamentary term is going to be extremely challenging, and let me explain why. Firstly, the biggest issue sits around construction workers. So the average construction workers on site, so the average construction worker at the minute sits 52 to 53 years old. So we have a shortage of people who've been able to come in and train.
I had no idea.
So not only have we got a shortage on workforce, but we're asking them to build 1.5 million houses. We're asking them to do the EPCs to 2030 on all the rental properties. And we're now going to ask them to bring in the decent home standard. So you're stretching that workforce in a number of areas.
Yeah.
You've also got a situation where even the swiftest of planning, just because a piece of land gets planning permission, doesn't mean that they're going to break a foot. You've got to have builders that are comfortable and developers that are going to put the money into putting a spade in the ground.
Because they're going to make some money.
Yeah. And the other issue we've got, of course, is there are a number of protections out there which are designed to protect the environment, protect the landscape, and recent announcements are suggesting that they want to do away with this. So at the Labour Party conference last year, Matthew Pennycook clearly said in the planning debate that if you had a local planner that was adopted in your area, that would form the basis of the decision making. So it was still down to local communities. If they'd done that process correctly, that would form that decision. If areas didn't have, they needed to get on with it.
Okay.
And that's been very, very well rooted. Obviously, we've just recently had announcements that they're now thinking of completely changing that and centralising planning and passing planning left, right and centre. The devil will be in the detail on this. The danger with land development is once you've done it, you've done it. You can't undo it. And the protections, whilst needing relaxing, probably were built up over a period of time for various reasons.
Deeply complicated.
It's very deeply complicated, and it's a danger that you just drop a grenade on it and blow it up.
Yeah.
And I think even people who operate within the planning sector and town planners and developers would all still be thinking we need some control, and certainly the ones I've spoken to are very much like that. The other issue is materials for construction. You know, we're 500 million bricks short as it stands at the moment. So there's a number of areas where not only the workforce, it's the materials, and it's the development finance, and how are you going to then facilitate first-time buyers and second-time buyers to buy?
Nathan, can you stop?
I can go on forever. But it's an interesting, complex problem. Yeah. They're having a go at cracking it. Yeah. Whether they get it right, that time will tell.
Final question, if I may, on the same topic. Land banks. The major developers have enormous supplies of land that they're not building on. Can we do anything about that?
I'm sure that is very much in the government's mind. I mean, and land banking is in several ways. So you've got land which has got planning permission on it. standard building plots are there, pieces of land with planning. You've got land which is under what's called an option agreement, where, and this is the hidden land. So this is where a developer comes to you, Phil, and says, Phil, just sign this document, and when we get planning permission, I'm going to give you some money now, and then we're going to get planning permission. When we get that, we'll complete the purchase. So this is land that's locked up, could be for years under option agreement, and the developers control a lot of that land, and then they'll put the planning forward when they think the time is right. And that's not necessarily shown on land registry documentation. It's not shown in the planning environment. It's land that's locked to developers under the table, effectively. And that, you know, there is a quantity of properties sat there that haven't been developed for various reasons. Affordability, the actual funding to actually go ahead and break ground and develop, or there could be various areas like the relevant agreements around services and provision that they've got to do in a local environment. So there is a lot of land sat there, and let's not forget, developers make money by land. One of the first things we talked about is buying a property and holding on to it for a long period of time. If you buy a piece of land with planning on it, its value increases. So actually, a lot of the big companies, part of their value sits on the fact they have those assets sat there that are increasing.
Nathan, always good to talk to you. Really interesting. Thank you so much.